welcome to another episode of Connected Conversations for Creatives, a place where creatives can learn, grow, and connect. I'm your host, Jennifer Carr. And today we are diving into a topic that resonates with every creative soul out there, the power of persistence and the strength it takes to believe in yourself despite the doubts that whisper in the corner of our minds. Imagine every day as a note in a symphony of your life. How do you make your melody heard above the noise? And how do you ensure that the narrative you tell yourself uplifts and propels you forward rather than holding you back? It's about overcoming that inner resistance that so often keeps our true potential just out of reach. Joining me today is a master of both words and music. Dan Petrosini is a USA Today best-selling author and a musician. Dan's journey is one of relentless perseverance, a testament to silencing doubt and embracing his own narrative to craft a life full of achievement. So whether you're a writer, a musician, or any kind of creative, this conversation promises to resonate, inspire, and maybe even help you alter the narrative you've been telling yourself. So without further delay, I'm excited to welcome Dan to the show. Dan, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Jennifer. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today. And hopefully, if we can just, between the two of us, give some inspiration for folks to keep on climbing the mountain, if you will, and to walk around some of the boulders that I know I have, and most people who've been able to accomplish anything, it's never a straight path for sure.
And me too. Absolutely. And you're so right. And I cannot wait to dive into this because it's something that it's not just for new authors and writers and creatives. It's for people anywhere along the path. But before we jump into that, let's start with the basics. How did you find yourself becoming a writer?
Well, I have always been interested in stories, right? Even as a young kid, I wrote my first little story about a Martian when I was 10 years old. And I was always captivated by someone who could tell orally a good story or even a good joke, and always was drawn in at that time. Being a young kid, Hitchcock was pretty popular back then. Might be showing my age a bit, but and the ability to just have folks glued to the screen. And then I was a reader. I was an avid reader, reading. Again, I was 10 or 12 years old, and I was reading about, teenage boys with their first cars and first girlfriends, and, found it all very enchanting, and wanted to create stories like that. But I kind of, I might cut in a bit here, but it wasn't as a 10-year-old I started writing and then just kept that journey. It was kind of a dream, and then life gets in the way, so to speak.
Yes.
And then there were many other shiny objects, right, that come along the path. What am I going to do with the rest of my life? Am I going to be a fireman? That looks cool. Or can I, whatever it was. But at some point, I found, and I believe it's probably common, that this fire that's burning inside of you, you want to kind of explore that. And one of my key tenets of living my life is that not to have regrets, right? So my favorite quote is that the price of discipline is always less than the cost of regret.
Yes.
So at some point in my life, I said, wow, I want to be able to. The two things I always wanted to be able to do was to write a book and then to play an instrument. So I started to explore those later on in life because I couldn't quench that fire, right? It was there, and I said, I have to give this a chance. And I think too often people, because it's tough to do anything new, right? You're skinning your knees left and right, whether it's trying to learn how to wakeboard or trying to color paint, watercolor, whatever it is that you might do, draw, anything, learn an instrument, speak a foreign language, anything that we do is difficult. We forget that when we didn't know how to talk as kids. Right. and that struggle to try to express ourselves was just accepted, but now when we struggle later on in life, oh my God, people are going to think I'm an idiot, or I'm a failure, or so on and so forth. So I think we have to get a little bit more childlike in our approach to trying to chase down our dreams.
Oh, for sure. So when did you know that writing was going to be it for you? Like when did that click into place?
Again, I always revered storytellers, right. Always loved great books. you know, and reading those books and going, wow, you know, I wish I could do this. I have my own stories that I want to do. I guess some of it was frustration with the predictable nature of some of the books that I read, and certainly some of the TV shows or movies that we watched. You could see it coming, and I would say, God, I could do this better. Or I have a way that I might be able to do. Again, some of it was, you know, quite a bit of hubris, but but that's what drove me. I think I could do this. I really believe I can do that, and I have stories and subjects that I want to explore, and try to, you know, again, in my own spin on things, I guess, is the proper way of structuring it. So, but I wasn't able to really go full tilt until I was an adult, and I had responsibilities. I have 2 daughters and a wife, and we had to provide. I had responsibilities there, so period. So you have to make a buck, so to speak. But as I approached 40, I started to get real nervous that the things that I really wanted to do, I wouldn't be able to do, or at least to give them full airing out. So that's, you know, maybe in my late 30s, somewhere around 36 or 37, I started to say, I started writing. And of course, it wasn't all peaches and cream. I realized it was much more difficult than I thought. So that's when I did it. And then somewhere in my, you know, maybe mid 40s is when I basically went full time. Just to try to give it a shot, give it a chance.
I love that. What is it about getting close to 40? Because that's when I started writing too. Like, I've always loved writing. I've always loved putting words on a page. But the closer I got to 40, the more I thought, I've never done this before. I want to do that. And then, you know, here I am almost 4 books later, and I'm going, that wasn't so bad. Because I'm only 40. But, you know, it was leading up to 40 that I was just like, wow, like, this is something I really love. And I didn't know that I would.
Yeah, I think it's almost, you know, essentially, I mean, I hate to get macabre about it, but it's essentially your own mortality a little bit, because, you know, if you look at the average lifespan, I mean, again, we're living longer and all that stuff, great. But it's somewhere around the midpoint. And you're going to, like, if I'm going to do this, I better get my tail moving, you know. And then as you probably are aware, it takes, again, you don't know this, but it does take quite a bit of time and a number of words to start to get proficient at the craft, because it is a craft and it has to be worked at. So, you know, if you look at your earlier works, for me anyway, I should say, let me speak about myself. I look at them, cringe a little bit, and I go, ooh, you know.
Yes.
Someone said, and I'm not sure if it's true or not, but it takes somewhere around 1 million words for you to learn your craft. So that, yeah, exactly. So
I've got a minute.
yeah, I know that's a pretty tall mountain to climb. I wouldn't want to dissuade anybody, but that's becoming, you know, I don't want to use the word an expert or craftsman, but certainly if you wrote 1 million words, that's somewhere around 10 or 12 books. You know what the heck you're doing by that time.
We kind of hope so anyway. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, you and I both know that writing and being an author is one of those things that it can look glamorous from the outside, but there is some serious hustle and grind involved. And so, you know, you can't just want to be an author or a writer. Like, you actually have to do the work. You can't just say, I'm going to write a book and sit down for a minute, put some words on a page and be like, oh, I've written a book. There's so much more that goes into it. But sometimes we do hit those boulders that you mentioned earlier, and people don't see that, right? They don't see the boulders that we've come across. They don't see the stumbling blocks that we find ourselves in, whether it's creativity or the business side of things. So can you speak from your personal experience and how you kind of navigated those blocks that you might have hit along the way?
Well, I love the way you framed it, because it is true that, you know, and it might be Hollywood that kind of created this image of a writer in some cabin with the fireplace going on, and, you know, and they're just like rapping the stuff out. So yeah, that couldn't be further from the truth, right? Yeah. And someone said, and I can't remember the author, so the attribution is going to be a little murky, but that don't tell me you want to be a writer. Writers write.
Yes.
So. And with that, and I believe that. So I write every day. I mean, the day doesn't pass that all right. And I understand that there are people, let's say a single mother with 3 children to take care of. So trying to write every day is an impossibility. But whatever schedule that you're able to do, whether that's 1 hour on a Saturday morning between 9 and 10, while the kids are in soccer practice or whatever they're doing, that you write that 1 hour and you do it every week, right? Yes. That consistency is key because the words do pile up. At the end of the day, if you write, again, only once a week and you were able to write, let's say 500 words, by the end of the year, you have a nice book, or you have a book and a half or something like that. So another quote that I love to, and I'll explain this, about this consistency and this whole thing where the aura of a muse is going to come in and, the work flows through you. That's basically BS, in my opinion. They're really very rarely. I mean, sometimes yes, you get in a state where you have a scene and it comes out nicely, and it just comes through you. It's not magic, but it comes through you. But most of the time, it's a bit of a struggle to write. And people call that writer's block, and I don't personally believe that it exists. I think that that's an excuse for us. That resistance is there. And then you kind of say, well, it's not happening. And then you just leave. Well, I think that you have to keep your tail in the chair and force the words out. So, and what do I mean by that? There are 2 ways to do that. Just, and it's very instructive in my experience, and I'll share it. But, so let's say if you painted yourself into a corner writing, a plot corner, and you go, oh my gosh, how am I going to get out of here? Or how can I get these 2 people together to meet that need to happen, and without being purely coincidental, which readers discount right away, or some other issue with a plot that you have to resolve, and you just don't have the answer at that moment. So you can do one thing: you can close up your laptop and go for a walk and hope it happens that way, or you could just go, I'll take it out tomorrow, or I can't figure this out. It's too hard, all that jazz. Or you can say, you know what? I need to write the follow-up scenes after that. So let me leave it there and write other scenes that need to happen in this book. So doing that, you're still moving the project forward, and then you're allowing your subconscious, and because you're thinking about the problem that you have to solve, and lo and behold, it works itself out. But to get up and walk away is not good. And to use it as an excuse not to push the project forward is not good.
Yes.
So just one other thing that I wanted to express, which I found pretty revealing, which what I call forcing the words out. So I'm writing a scene, it's just not coming, and I just force myself to sit there and just push it out and push it out, push it out. The way I write is I write approximately 10 to 20,000 words, and I go back to the beginning, read through it, make some corrections, drop some in, whatever needs to happen in that initial, that 10 or 20,000 words. What I found out was that I was unable to distinguish between the stuff that quote unquote flowed and the stuff that was forced. And once I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, this really is the way to go forward. So happening. So one more thing about the persistence, about the struggle, if you will, and I have a lot of things to talk about that, but one of the things about it's very, very typical, and you may have shared experiences. You start a project, you have this great idea, you're charged up beyond belief. This is the greatest American novel that's ever been written, and you're just so excited, and you start writing, and you're all pumped up. And then somewhere around approaching the middle, you go, oh my goodness, this is horrible, and how am I going to tie all these plot points together? And it becomes very, very frustrating. And so what we do at that point is we take that work and we stick it in the bottom of the drawer, and we approach the next great idea we have. So we never finish that. One of the things that I've learned is to finish what you started.
I like it.
Finish it. You can finish it. Get it to you can't fix it if it's not written.
Yeah.
So doing that, and it's not easy to overcome that.
Right.
Yeah. Not easy, to be stuck with almost every book is almost like a mess at some point.
Yes.
Oh my God. So that's a little bit about the quote unquote resistance. Um, I want to make sure that I cover one other
Yeah.
point before. So recently, now I have about somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 books, novels, full-length novels that are out there. So I embarked on a new series, and I wrote book one. And it was a difficult to write because it was a totally different book, totally different than what I've written the last 15 or so books. And I was really proud that again, not to say it was easy. It was not easy, folks. There were many, many points where I would go, oh my gosh, I'm going to go back to what I know how to do. Not that knowing what I had to do was easier. It just was an easier process. But I got it to the end, and through the editing process and everything, I was really, really proud of what I've accomplished because it was new, and the way the ending got tied up and all that. I was like, wow, I was really feeling good about myself, about my ability to write. So now I have to write book two in the series. I write book now, and book one was pretty well received, and the editors, everybody was really like, you did it, man, So I'm starting to write book two, and I'm going, I can't do this. How am I going to do that? How am I going to do that again? And here it is, if somebody has almost 30 books under their belt, I had that, what they call imposter syndrome, that, I can't do this again. And I knew, and I'm as I'm experiencing it, I'm observing this thing on me, and I'm going, wow, this is really interesting. So I'm observing it. I'm trying not to let it consume me, right? I'm looking at it like kind of like above myself and going, wow, you need to set this aside, man, and you need to trust yourself. Because one of the things I've learned to do, and I would love your listeners to get, is at some point you have to trust yourself. Stop doubting yourself, get it down on paper, or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, get it down on paper, get it on the canvas, whatever, and get it complete, and try to keep those demons out of your head. Yeah. So imposter syndrome was really, and that was just very recent. Now I'm writing another book. That book just got released about 4 days ago.
Nice.
So the second book, but it was not easy. It was a difficult book to write, with and without the self-doubt, imposter syndrome, however you want to talk about it. But stick with your vision, folks.
Yes, I think, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit. You were talking about, just sit down and write. Sometimes when I come across those blocks, it helps for me to write down what's blocking me. Because I know there's usually, I've got a list of things in my head to do, or there's a deeper issue that I'm struggling with. And so journaling, you may not be sitting down to write in your book or in the project you're working on, but if you will write something, right, just write something, it's like dusting the shelf, and then all of a sudden you have a clear shelf. And so, yeah, like I love that. But you can't write if you're not in the seat writing. You were so right.
Yeah. I think what you kind of touched upon is something that's important that we kind of discount, which is a subconscious. And I again, it sounds a little woo-ish, that, but I have a kind of a weird practice that I do when I wake up in the morning. Generally, I don't just hop out of bed. Especially when I'm having a problem with the project I'm working on, I lay in bed for a few minutes and I introduce that problem into my head, and then I push it right out. And then my subconscious kind of like gives me a couple of clues and things float in my head. It doesn't work all the time, of course, but I'm not actively thinking about it. I've introduced it. It's like going for a walk, and which is another thing I do quite a lot. Going for a walk, and I could be listening to a podcast, maybe your great podcast, and something is said between a guest, or you pose a great question, and then somewhere in the back of my head there's something happening, and it doesn't happen. It's not like sometimes I'm writing as I'm walking. Boom, I got to type into my phone. But most of the times, nothing concrete comes out of it. But slowly but surely, I use the word for subconscious. Your mind is working on this problem in the background, and it offers solutions. And some of the solutions you discount right away and they don't work. But eventually, one comes along that's suitable for the problem.
Absolutely.
that
And
you're
it's not
facing.
woo woo. Like, I'm a former marriage and family counselor. Subconscious, that's a thing. Like, I am all about the psychology of how your mind works. And so I would also take it a step further and say, pay attention to your dreams. Like, when you are trying to solve a problem in your story, pay attention to your dreams, because that's literally your subconscious trying to solve problems for you. And so, yeah, there's no woo woo here. Like,
Yes.
let's talk about it.
Well, it's crazy that it's funny that you mentioned that. So last night and 2 nights previously, I had dreams that I was in boxing matches, and I've never done anything like that. So this morning when I woke up, and I have pretty good dream recollection, I was thinking to myself, wow, what's the message? This is the second time in 3 days. I got to figure this out. Like, what is it that my mind or conscious is trying to tell me or communicate here? So it's really, really interesting. You also mentioned about, just dreams in a more not in a sleep oriented way, but I think that we should chase our dreams, right? So but there's a difference between a dream and a realistic goal, right? And the way I think about these types of things is, if I want to be a writer, my dream, my existence has to be committed to that, right? So I saying it at a cocktail party that I'm going to start writing a book doesn't mean anything to me. I speak to 1 million people who tell me they're going to write a book and all that stuff. Very, very few people do it. And it is tough. It's tough because, and I tell many, many people who have written a book, I said, you finished the book, I don't care if that book is not readable. You have done something that less than 1/10 of 1% of the planet has been able to do, and bravo to you. I mean, unbelievable. You accomplished something. So just getting it done is something to be proud of yourself, whether or not it's a literary work of art or not. But so whatever your goal is, you have to kind of like embody it, and you have to think about it. You have to be that dream. Nothing is ever accomplished, in a part-time world. I mean, it's just, you got to do it every day. I want to go back to a little bit of the inspiration, the creativity, the subconscious, however you want to wrap this thing up. So I play music as well, and I find myself many, many times that after I'm writing and I get, like, quote unquote, a little exhausted. So I try to write 1,000 words every day. So if I'm somewhere and it's a tough day and I'm like 528 words, and I do look at this constantly. Many times I'll take a break, and then I'll take out my horn and I'll practice the horn or play some music for an hour or so. And that kind of refreshes your creativity stream a bit. I mean, it's not magic, but it's much akin to, if you don't play music, you can go for a swim, you can go for a walk, you could do, anything just to take a break there, to give your creativity stream a chance to rejuvenate a little bit. Not magic, but it definitely works.
It does. It's another one of those. It distracts your mind, so that it can continue to process. And it's really funny because so far you have answered every question that I had on my guide to guide the conversation. So I'm like, I'm not even going to have to ask questions, but I do have to ask. You said earlier in the conversation that you started playing music later in life. So how did you fall into just picking up an instrument, deciding this is what I want to do?
Well, funny thing is, speaking about difficult to write, I think that it was actually more difficult for me to learn an instrument as an adult than it was anything else. It really was. But the way I do approach anything that I want to do is I'm an all-in guy. So I dedicate my time. I'm going to play my horn every day, and I'm going to work like a dog, so I could get to a level of proficiency. Some people are talented, musically, if you will, maybe have a great ear, et cetera, et cetera. They play as a child. But generally, there's no such thing as, overnight success, overnight talent. You have to put the work in. That's it. You have to put the work in. No matter what it is that you do. Music is a great one. They'll show somebody on a stage that is unbelievable, technically incredible on the piano, whatever. You go, oh my God, this person's a genius. They're not a genius. They didn't show you the 15 years of practicing that they did. So to be good at anything, you have to put the time in, whether it's writing, painting, any creative process, and frankly, any job. You could not be a great interviewer if you didn't interview a lot of people.
That's right. That's exactly right.
It's a skill set
Yes.
that needs to be practiced.
Yes, and what's funny is you can be good at something, but I think the goal should be to be great at something, and that's where because you can be a natural prodigy at writing, at music, whatever. You can be a natural, but to be great at it and not just be technical, right? To feel the art in it, because I could sit down and I could pick out Mary Had a Little Lamb, but my father-in-law could make it into like a symphony piece. You know what I mean? Like, because I didn't practice, but he did.
Yeah. I think, and I think anyway, expressing yourself, whether musically or any kind of art form, is really like, which we should be grateful that we have these opportunities to do that, because it really, shakes the dust off your body that life kind of accumulates. We're going to have all kinds of things happening in our lives, and losses that we experience, and sickness, and so on and so forth, all kinds of struggles in the day-to-day human existence. So to have an outlet that will help you, cleanse that, is really a true gift that we have. And one that with the two that we're talking about anyway, and I guess painting is the same way for sure, is something you could do your entire life.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything about sports, but if you played football in high school, there aren't many 40-year-olds playing football.
The body gives out.
And there certainly are no 60-year-olds. So, so I think, if you have an opportunity to get involved in the arts and express your creativity in some form, it's the gift that keeps giving, and it can give in your entire life. It's good for your soul. I know I don't want to sound too, woo-woo, but it is good for your soul, and you feel good. And when you write, I mean, maybe you have the same experience. Sometimes when you write, you just, maybe it's the fact that I don't like writing, but I love having written. But after you have a session, whether it was struggling or not, there's always struggle in every session for me. You feel good when you're done.
Yes.
Yes. You really feel good. And it's also good for, let's say, your cognitive operation. Certainly, yeah. Yes. So I think all of those things, as we're becoming, let's say, more aware of, these are good things for your health, your mental health, your physical health. Exercising your brain in these ways, and it's fun, man. It's fun.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know about yourself, but I say that my goal is I write for myself, right? But of course I want people to read. But the first reader is me, the writer. I want to be able to entertain myself. Is this entertaining to me? And that's the person I think you should write for. I know people say write to an audience and all that, but I would say write for yourself. Yes. Because let's not forget that the big studios, they churn out flop after flop after flop. So they don't have a hold on what's going to be a hit. And if you look at the publishing industry, the same thing, and music industry, right? There's no formula. Even though they try to create a formula, there really is no formula.
I agree.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and it's funny. I started writing my first book because, one, I had a dream that I needed to know how it ended. Like, it started and I was like, but I woke up too soon. Like, I need to know how it ended. So I started writing and I was like, oh, there's a lot of words on these pages. I think I'll just continue. But as I got farther into it, I realized that I was writing a book that I would want to read in a genre that I quit reading because all the books were kind of lame and they weren't like the books I wanted to read.
Yeah.
And so I wrote for me, and then the next book and the next, like, I wrote them for people like me who were like, I'm tired of these cookie cutter books where, by 75% on my Kindle, they're going to break up and get back together by 85%.
Yeah.
I'm done with that.
No, right. I agree with you. And that's really, at the end of the day, what I follow the same path, because I'm going like, these stories are so predictable. I mean, I know who the killer is on page 3. And then, as you're saying, basically they're hitting all the tropes at the same point. And unfortunately, the publishing advice business, it's an industry. I mean, there's so many people out there telling you how to write. And they all give you, they give you the same kind of information. They're telling everybody, this has to happen up 22% of the way in. This has to happen at this point, and so on and so forth. I like to watch a different, innovative program. I like to watch an innovative movie. To me, it has to be realistic, right? Because I'm not rooted. I'm rooted in the real. I'm not a fantasy reader, so I need it to be real. That said, if you have something like a Star Trek, that the world is so perfect in that world for them, then you got me. I'm in. So I wanted to touch upon one other thing that I recently experienced, and it has application for writing as well, but just in general, and I need a creative process, is this was musical. So I had to do a performance, and I had a couple of solos in this performance, and I was really, really nervous. And anyone says that that you don't get nervous is nonsense. When you give your book to someone to read, my knees are knocking, okay? So, and the same thing, and I think it was Pavarotti who said that anyone who tells you that when they're performing, and he's so gregarious, right? He looked like he enjoyed being up there. He said anyone who gets on a stage and tells you that nervous is lying, And then the great stage actor, Michael Caine, right, is in 100 movies, whatever it is, probably more. Every time he plays live on a play in the theater, he throws up before he goes on stage. So that was so revelatory to me. So embrace your nervousness, stick it on the side. But what I realized in this case was that I was kind of focused on, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this part because I don't have this technical ability about this solo, and just going on, and I like a lot of self-doubt, which is natural. And then I don't know if I heard it, remembered it, whatever it was. It's about focus on the big, not on the little, which is kind of the opposite about becoming an expert, right? You want to have everything kind of like everything tied up in a bow. But in this particular case, I'm saying my journey is moving forward in a big way, in a positive, great way. Yes, there's a couple of pebbles that are giving me problems in my shoes, but at the end of the day, I'm running the race. So there's a lot of positive momentum. So focus on your positive momentum. Focus on the achievements that you have, and not the nagging problems. Work on those problems, right? But don't let them pull you down. You're making progress. So you got to keep that in focus. And at the opening, you set up like the best thing, talking about narrative. The story we tell ourselves is the most important thing about our happiness.
Yes.
Forget about achievement, your happiness. So you can choose to tell yourself that, I'm a crappy writer, I'm terrible, I'll never get this finished. Or you're going to say, man, I'm encountering some difficulties in this process, but wow, man, I wrote 17 words yesterday. I have 17 more today than yesterday. So celebrate your small wins, because they help you gain momentum. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And that inner narrative that you're hearing is going to be the loudest voice that you could have 1-star reviews all down Goodreads all day long. And what's going to be the loudest is what you're telling yourself. Like those, other people's voices. Yeah, they might sting a little bit, but the one you believe the most is the one you're telling yourself, the one that you're speaking to yourself. And so you have to reframe that. Yeah, you may be struggling, but there's nothing that says you can't say, like you said, I have 17 more words than I did before, and dadgummit, they're good words,
Yeah.
And they can be changed and added to and fixed, and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, and I mean, you hit a sore subject talking about reviews. I think you mentioned,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really interesting that you can have 20 decent reviews or great reviews, or however you want to classify them, and then you have one person who just kills you. But at the end of the day, and we're destroyed by that, right? You're destroyed. You go, oh my God, and you focus on it. You're going like, oh wow,
Yep.
What truth might have been in there. Look, if you have 10 people that are telling you the same problem in your book, there's a legitimate concern that needs to be addressed, right? But if you have 1 out of 20 that's unhappy, a reader that just didn't enjoy the story, well, okay, that's fine. You can, I mean, actually, if you had 20 people who liked it, you can have 5 or 6 that didn't, and you still sell a hell of a lot of books.
Yes.
So again, listen to what the reasons they say and find out if there's any commonality to it. And if there's no commonality to it, then just discount it. Say, hey, my wife and I could watch a show that she likes and I don't like, or we read a lot of the same books too. We're reading the same book, and I'll tell her all the time, how you like that book? Well, I don't really like it. You don't like it? I thought it had a great opening, and so on and so forth. We're just different human beings. That's it.
Yes, exactly. Your book is meant for certain readers, not every reader.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Sorry. Yes. Oh my gosh. And reviews, in my opinion, and it's kind of hard to say, like, if you're seeing reviews, first of all, don't dwell on reviews. Like, don't go looking at them every single day. But if there is some sort of pattern, absolutely pay attention to them. But to me, reviews are mostly for readers and not the writers. Does that make sense? Like, that's
sure.
It's a hard place to be, because you want to know how people feel about your work, but at the same time, you've got readers who are leaving reviews in order to tell other readers, if you like this book, you'll like this book because we have this in common. But if you don't, then you won't. So reviews are. It's a shaky ground.
No, I agree with you. It's a touchy subject, especially when, it's really interesting, obviously, for author speak, and folks and, readers and listeners to this may not, pay too much attention to it. But if you just think about the difference between the average rating of a book on Amazon versus the average rating of a book on Goodreads, Goodreads reviews are really much more critical. So I don't know where that's coming from. But I've been okay. So I haven't really been, my averages are pretty similar. So, but if you get a 4-star rating on Goodreads, man, you're going to be going, yeah, that's good. If you get a 4 on Amazon, I'm going, oh man, where's my 5? So, it's very interesting, but they can be demoralizing. And some authors just never read them. So
yes, and I get that. I totally get. Like, I didn't even have a review. It was just a star rating on a book that, it hadn't gotten below a 4-star in any of the ratings, and then she all of a sudden left a 2-star, and I'm like, who are you? I need to know where you live. Like, we need to talk about this.
Yeah, and then you get some of those the really stupid ones where like I had one early on that somebody gave me a 1-star, but they referenced the wrong book. It wasn't even my book. And I went to Amazon. I said, "This is not even it." They won't even take it down. They didn't even care, And there's a little bit of vindictiveness too in some of the way people, do that. But anyway, we need the reviews to increase our visibility. So any readers out there, please be gentle on us. We're fragile beings.
We're already bleeding our souls onto the page. Please
and how?
Be nice.
And how? Every book takes something out of you, as you know.
It does. It really does. And it's so nice for reviewers to put in the time to tell, how they felt about your book. It means that they've read your work, and maybe it connected with them, maybe it didn't. But I would say for authors, the reviewers are not your people. And I don't mean that in a negative way against readers. I love my readers. I appreciate the ones that I have made personal connections with in some form or fashion. But find your people who will speak into you, that will make you a better writer, who will make you a better author. Just make sure you surround yourself with people who, not an echo chamber, but people who will hold you accountable for your work. That's so important to me.
One thing, talking about this, the struggling thing, I just want to go back to that for a second, because there's a very good book, the War of Art, rather. So the original one by that Chinese philosopher, The Art of War, Sun, whatever, I can't pronounce it. But
Okay.
Stephen Pressfield, who's an author who's written a bunch of books, including Legend of Bagger Vance, which was that movie that Kevin Costner was in. He wrote a book called The War of Art. And basically, it talks about the resistance that we encounter as writers when we sit down to write. And it's a pretty quick read. And I would encourage anyone who's struggling with, as he calls it, the resistance, writer's block, whatever you want to call it, but the resistance that we all face, including self-doubt, all of that jazz. And he kind of goes into it in depth. But it's a quick read, and it might be helpful to listeners who are contemplating on writing or struggling at the moment to take a look at that book, Stephen Pressfield.
I'm writing it down.
I would definitely get it. It's called The War of Art.
We can even put it in the show notes. Like I made a note so that I can stick it in the show notes. Yeah, that's fantastic.
That's good.
So, Dan, tell us. You said you had a book that just came out 4 days ago. What projects? Tell us about the project. You said it was book 2 of a series. So, do you want to talk about that series?
Yes. So, the new series is called The Art of Payback. So that was a good segue with that art thing. The Art of Payback. So I've always been fascinated with revenge and people's preoccupation with it, and the holding grudges, and this whole thing, where it's so unhealthy, right? But the revenge aspect, retribution, vigilantism, however you want to call it. I'm not interested in vigilantism, only because I believe, even though this is a form of it, your typical eye for an eye is not interesting to me. It's been done a gazillion times, right? There are a million movies and books written on, you killed my wife, then I'm going to kill your wife, your mother, your father, and all that jazz. So I was, again, thinking about revenge and how preoccupied many people are with it. How do I explore this subject? And there are legitimate cracks in the justice system. People get off on technicalities and all that jazz. Meanwhile, the victim and the victim's family are still suffering with this. How do we even the score without becoming obsessed with it and not losing yourself, right? Because you basically lose yourself. So I came up with this idea of trying to find creative ways for revenge, but not using violence, non-violent ways. So I'm not, I'm not a guy who writes sex scenes. I'm not a guy who does a lot of cursing in the books, and I'm not big with the violent stuff. Although I wrote, 20 murder mysteries, there's not like much gore, if you will, in them. So I created a character who had, a little bit of a tragic childhood, lost his mother to murder for somebody who was out on bail, that type of thing. So that backstory kind of works for his thing, that he wants to help other people who have been wronged or have not been able to get justice in the system. And I don't want to give away too much more, but it stretched my ability, my creative well. I went scrape the bottom. And as I said, the first book was called Race to Revenge, and the second one is Beyond Revenge. And so, as I said, I struggled writing book 2 because I didn't believe I was going to be able to come up with good concepts and be able to execute them well. And in fact, the editor it's interesting too, that when I went into this new direction, I went back to a really, really difficult editor I had early on in my career, who you would kick the heck out of you, they would kick your tail left and right. But he was very expensive. And since I felt like I knew how to write the other books, after a period of time, I stopped using him. But anytime I've gone on a new project, this is the second time I've done a new project, I bring him back on because he is so good. And I wanted to make sure. And then the second book, he said, wow, basically you really, he was very complimentary. So that, boosted my ego a little bit and helped. help to heal some of the wounds I created writing the book. So that's a series that I'm going to write at least one more book. I planned it as a trilogy because I didn't think I would have so many creative ways to exact this a satisfying revenge, if you will. And I'm going to. I don't want to give it away, but as I close it, I'm going to try to address the revenge need fallacy head on.
Interesting. So does it follow the same character through or is it a different? Okay.
Yes. No, it's the same character, same main character who is the let's say the justice guardian, if you will, and he helps people achieve a satisfying revenge without an eye for an eye mentality and not violence. But he's realizing that he's losing himself also as he's doing all this, right? I mean, it's yeah. So there's that whole thing that I'm working with as well. But after I finished that book, as soon as I finish it, I start a new project right away, and I've got about 10 or 12,000 words on another book, which I'm going, which is another series that I'm just starting, but it's got more with my most successful series is a series called the Luca Mystery Series. And those are basically murder mysteries. And there are 15 full-length novels plus 2 prequels. And the prequel, so I'm going back now. He retired, but now I have him in a wholly, it's kind of more of a thriller thing, international component, all this. So we'll see. It's a little bit, I'm reaching. So we'll see where we get.
Was it hard to jump back into that world after you kind of took yourself out for a minute?
Not really, because I knew that character so well. It's interesting. The story about that character is that I had an idea that about exploring a brain injury, a traumatic brain injury that someone suffered, and the person who suffered because I watched a documentary about it, and I was like, wow, this is such an incredible subject. And the way my mind works, a couple of days later, I'm saying, what happens if you were accused of murder and you had a TBI and you said you couldn't recall the events of that night, and either that was true, you couldn't legitimately because of your injury, or B, you were using your injury to shield you and say, I don't know. So I thought that was a really interesting story. And as I wrote that book, somewhere around the middle, the murder happened, and I needed a detective to investigate. And this detective, it just clicked with me. I was like, oh my God. And he hijacked the book, and I had a big mess in my hands. And I promised myself that if the book sold, that I would write a series based on him. And that's what, I was lucky enough that book sold, and I said, let me do that. So I know him very, very well. And he's a fun character to work with. But I also, don't want to be bored, as a writer. I want to explore new territory. I want to be able to try to reach outside what I'm comfortable with. And challenge myself and explore issues that interest me.
I love that. No, that's fantastic. All right, so we are to the part of the show where we can flip the script. Are you interested in flipping the script?
Absolutely, yeah. You're an interesting creative that I like. I really do believe that, I love to talk to people that are creative. I always get something out of it and going, wow, I love that spin on it. She said that thing. Wow. And I'll think about what you said later.
All right. Well, the show is yours.
Yeah, man, that's cool. So tell me, you had mentioned earlier that some of the ideas that you had, or your initial idea when you wrote your first book, came out of a dream. So what is your creative process, dream aside? Where do you get your ideas from, and how do you take them forward?
Sure. So the first book, like I said, and what's funny is that by the time I was done writing it, it looked completely different at the beginning than what the dream actually was, which is, it had some of the same elements, like, the girl, the female main character, she had some extrasensory perception abilities and that kind of thing. And so, some things stayed the same. But then by the time I got to the end of it, I was like, that is not what I expected. And then the second book, I needed to know that those characters were okay. So I wrote my second book just to make sure that they were okay. Like, they were like, hey, check in on us. And I said, okay, great. I am working on a 1.5 to kind of fill in some blanks there for that series. But it's not my main focus because right now I'm working on a series called Real American Country, and that one started with a country music song, which I love. I'm obsessed with 90s country music. I've always loved 90s country music. And so a song played and these two characters popped up and said, "Hey, that's our song. Tell our story." And I thought, oh, okay. So, yeah.
That's a great idea. I like that. Yeah. I like that. I mean, there's a tremendous amount. The guy's name escaped me, but a song is basically a tiny story. It really is, and it has that hook at the beginning, and Wichita Lineman or something like that. You just it sets it up. I can't remember the songwriter. I'm really struggling. When I do it, I'll email it to you. He was on an interview. He's a really famous songwriter. He's in his early 70s now or something like that. And the art, I don't know. He talks about songwriting, and as I was listening to him, I go, "Man, this is just like writing. It is writing. It's a form of writing." So, all right. So now let me ask you another question. What's the best advice you've received as a writer?
Hire an editor.
1,000%.
But do you know how many people and how many because I'm self-published, and that's the world that I love because I have control issues. And so, and maybe one day that will change once I, get my feet a little wetter. I don't know, but I love the control element. I love building my tribe. I love that kind of thing. And the number of self-published books that I have read where it's clear that they did not invest in a good editor. And I guess that's the advice was to hire a good editor. And my first editor, I love her. She's also an author in the genre that she was editing, and she did a great job. My second book of that series, I turned to a different editor, and she just so happens is my sister. And people say don't work with your sister, but she's literally a genius. Yeah. And so, I invested in a good editor, and the difference between the first edits and the second edits, it's amazing. Yeah. And so, invest in a good editor, and don't just go with the first one that gives you a deal. Yeah. An editor will make all the difference.
Well, that is the most solid advice that I can think about. I'm not kidding you. I didn't, when I first started out, I didn't use a technical editor at that particular point, and it definitely shows big time.
Yeah.
And then, there are two types of editors, as you're aware, but maybe the listeners are. So, most people think about it as like a line editor that makes sure the grammar's right and all that jazz, that the certain story is consistent. But also, especially, it's very helpful for, beginners, if you will, is to have a developmental editor that will look at things and say, wait a minute, this theme is not consistent with that theme, or you should have explored this particular subject, or get off your soapbox here. Those types of things. So let me ask you another question then. What about the worst advice you think you ever received?
Design your own covers. It's cheaper.
Yeah.
Honestly, a cover can make or break your book.
Yeah.
And a good cover designer will make all the difference. Again, that's also different in the self-publishing versus traditional publishing world, because a lot of that's included with your contract. But just because you know how to use Canva does not make you a book cover designer. And so,
I'm actually, and I mean this, I'm not being patronizing at all, but your two answers are just so spot on.
I mean, they're so basic, right? Some people would be like, the best advice is to come up with a routine. Yeah. No, seriously, it's the basics.
Yeah, if you would have asked me, I'm not sure I would have came up with those answers. I definitely would have. But they're so relevant, and they can have such a dramatic impact on whether or not a reader reads your book, as in the editor, and hates it, or B, whether or not, as you alluded to, the ability to get visibility is predicated on somebody clicking on a cover and they're only seeing a little thumbnail of it. I agree with you. And I made my first covers myself too.
I did too.
Yeah, I agonized over them. It took a lot of time, and I thought they were so great. But as soon as I got any kind of, let's say, momentum, I had them completely redesigned by people who did that for a living. Yeah, we don't have any other thing that I don't do. Although on this last one, I actually kind of did it myself the first time in a very, 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 very long time, was write the blurb. Yeah, right, exactly.
Hard pass. I mean, I do it,
Yeah,
but it takes me the entire
yeah,
time from the time I start writing the book till probably the day before it's published. No, not really, but like
yeah,
I hate
yeah.
writing the blurb.
Doing a blurb is almost as bad as doing advertising.
That's a whole, and that is a different conversation that we could probably wax poetic on for hours because, ugh.
Yeah, yeah. I think that if there's any aspiring writers out there, also another important mistake that I made myself anyway,
Mm.
was genre hopping when I first started out. So I didn't stick to a particular lane. So, I wrote a sci-fi, I wrote a coming of age story, I wrote a political espionage book. I wrote, just everything because that's what I wanted to do. And I felt, and it was, look, if that's what you want to do it, explore those things. But if you want to gain traction with readers, they have to know who you are, because very few readers, I don't want to make a broad statement, but most readers, I believe is true, if they like to read murder mysteries, they may read romance, but they're not going to read, fantasy, those types of things. And sci-fi readers are not going to read cozy mysteries. So if you write in both of those genres,
Yes.
then maybe you should have a pen name. So that was and the other thing, but you smartly already covered that. The other mistake that I was told early on to write a series, and I resisted, because believe it or not, I'm not really a series writer. Series reader. I didn't read. I wasn't big on reading, 5 books in a row in a particular thing. Although I've done that, of course. But now, if you don't write in a series, you're really difficult to get traction, man. Really.
Isn't that crazy? And I've had that conversation. I co-host a different podcast. It's a live podcast once a week, and neither of the two co-hosts, neither of them write in a series. And then they complain about, and honestly, like, I'm sorry, but a series is kind of where it's at right now. It may change. It wasn't always like that, but it may. I mean, you look at what Dean Koontz and the series.
Yeah.
Series, that's what it is.
Look, it could be, because the other issue we're confronting as writers or creatives in general is this shortened attention span type of thing, and this whole binge mentality that Netflix created. So that binge mentality on Netflix really strengthened the hand for writing in a series. So you lock somebody in, and they like book 1 or book 2, whatever it is, and they go through. I was so silly about it that when I first started writing the Lucas series, I made sure that every book was standalone anyway. It could be read out of order, even though there are character arcs and things that are happening through the whole series. I was still fixated that, I never liked reading or watching something that left me with a cliffhanger. I really resented that. I felt it was a dirty trick, actually, not to resolve the main issues, the main plot. But yeah, that I think if you do the 4 things that we just discussed, that you'll have a little bit of a smoother journey than the ones we may have encountered on the way here.
Exactly. Like take it from people who are learning the hard way before you.
Right. Right. 100%. Listen. Don't. It's like you go to a doctor, but you don't listen to his advice. Why are you going?
Exactly.
Listen to the professionals, and also just to be receptive to feedback. It may not have to be correct, but check your ego, basically, right? When you write a book and you put it out into the world, I mean, you cower. You're like, oh my God, my baby's out there. It's a baby. And then when somebody says something about your kid, you immediately you get offended. How dare you? That's not it. Well, you don't really know him. He's not. My Johnny's not a bad kid, so he made one mistake. Okay, don't nail me to the cross because I have a grammar issue in my book.
Yes.
So it's interesting, but it's so fun.
That's
It's
so funny. It is. And it's a wild journey that if you were to talk to anybody who's never done it, like when I talk to my parents about all of the things, they just kind of look at me and they're like, that's nice, honey. Like talking to anybody who's not an author, they have no idea what you're even going through. But it's that, and that's why we're here, right? Like that.
You are
Let's
100%
connect
right.
people with.
And one thing I will say that to the author community, in the far majority of it, is a very generous community. So
Yes.
as people have helped me, I'm always willing to help someone. And sometimes my wife goes like, "Oh my God, who is that person? You were on the phone with them 2 hours?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, somebody that was recommended by somebody." Goes, "You don't even know that person?" I said, "No, but they're trying to accomplish something. I could maybe show them a shortcut, if you will. I can't make it easy,
Yep.
but I can tell them what not to do and refer them to people that work for me. And if I could share my experiences, like many have shared with me, well, I feel I am obligated to do that." So I think again, the author community is just a generous, filled with mostly really nice folks. Yes.
Oh yeah, I mean, and there's exceptions to everything, but
Yeah.
yeah, you're 100% correct. And so, speaking of, how can listeners connect with you? Where can they find you and your books and
Um,
all of that?
well, of course, I'm all over Amazon. But if you can go to Amazon and just look up Dan Petrosini, or you can go to my website. I have a really nice website. So it's danpetrosini.com. So DanPetrosini.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on X. That's pretty much it, But I appreciate the opportunity. If anyone, a little bit of a plug, if you go to my website and sign up for my newsletter, I send it out twice a month. It's free. You will be able to download a book for free. So
Oh,
yeah, so
fantastic.
that's a little bit of a giveaway there. So and I look forward to chatting with any reader who wants to reach out to me.
That's awesome. All right, so I'm going to ask you the big question. It's your exit ticket. It's the one question everybody has to answer. Are you ready?
I hope so.
What is the one piece of advice or encouragement that you want listeners to walk away with if they hear nothing else today?
Whatever your dream or your goal is to start walking towards it. Don't listen to anyone else. They don't have the secret. They don't let somebody else prevent you from trying to attain what you want to attain. Most people's, and get the heck away from negativity, man. Okay, most people don't want to encourage you because they haven't been able to do it themselves. So,
Oh,
you were born to be a winner. Just do the work that's necessary to get the win.
mic dropped. Thank you. No,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. No, that's exactly right. Like, you do you, and who cares what anybody else says? Like, it's so simple.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's not.
Yeah.
Well, we all want approval, right? We do want approval, of course.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the reviews and all. We want approval. I want people to say, "Dan, you're a great guy. Dan, you wrote the best book," and all that jazz. But if you wait for that, most people are going to try to knock you down. We live in a culture where if I can't overachieve you, if I could bring you down,
Yeah.
I'm going to be above you. It's so insane. It's so childish. It's crazy. Everyone should just go and try to achieve. Again, go for what you want, but understand you're going to have to put the work in to get there. But you will get there. If you put the work in, you will get there. Undoubtedly.
100%. Dan, thank you so much for hanging out and having this conversation. If somebody leaves without taking something away, whatever, that's on them, because you brought it. And it was a fantastic just spending this hour just talking about, the encouragement, the inspiration that you brought. Just top notch. Thank you so much.
Jennifer, it was a pleasure. I'm honored to be on this podcast, and I'm looking forward to the next time when our paths will cross.
Yes, thank you.